Hello, everyone. Glad to see you again in our webinar sessions. Today we're speaking again about Jmix, and our today's topic is gaining cost savings and scalability for your digital products. Technically, I'm going to introduce the multi-tenancy implementation in Jmix and explain tools and technologies which can simplify the path to building SaaS applications for your team. Yeah, that's it. First, I would like to start with some assumptions because it will help us to shape the topics we are going to uncover today. First of all, we think that you've got an existing digital product or are going to build a new SaaS application. So that means that you have something on board and you are searching for different technologies and tools to go to the SaaS, to go to the SaaS concept. And we know the economy reality, and you should do this in a short term and strict budget limitations. So if you are seeking those targets, the topic of our today's webinar is preferable. So you got some software development skills. Most of the topics we'll uncover today, they are dedicated to development, and we assume that you have some Java basics or SQL basics or something like this. So we are somehow related to the software engineering area. Here you can see the retrospective of the attendees of our today's webinar. And you see that half of our audience today are developers, and another half is related to business somehow. So that means that we will try to balance in between those topics, the topic of multi-tenancy in the area related to development aspect, and in the area of related to business aspect. I've decided to announce today's agenda with a dedicated schema which describes two basic topics. So we are going to uncover today. The first one is cost savings, and another one is scalability. And let's try to decompose and understand what we can talk about when we talk about cost savings. First of all, the thing which you need to reduce developer expenses, is a unified, standardized, future-proof technology stack and dev tools. So this is one which definitely can shape your development processes in some standardized way. Another thing is a shared application and resources. This is the topic which uncovers how you can better utilize your resources. When we speak about scalability, the first thing which appears in our mind is cloud deployment. So everything which is connected to clouds is always about scalability right now. And the last topic which we'll touch today is the ability to support power users. We will explain why it's important, especially in the area of scalability, and how it can help developer teams to reduce their efforts on expanding the potential markets. And all these topics in combination will allow us to get closer to the SaaS concept. And this is the, let's say, the agenda of our today's webinar, and we'll uncover one box after another. And the first one is future-proof technology stack and the dev tools highlighted here on the agenda. And I don't want to speak a lot again about Jmix, our wonderful platform, which definitely resolves these tasks, providing you a proven architecture based on a mainstream open source technology stack, provides you rapid development tools and a marketplace. You can read a lot about this on our website. And I'm not going too deep discuss different aspects of using Jmix platform as it is. But I want to focus more on the availability and the capabilities of Jmix, which can allow you to get a shared application and an application with shared resources. Let's start with the basic concept, and which I guess most of you really have in your in-house development. We know that a lot of developer teams come to us asking about the capabilities of Jmix in the area of supporting microservices or hyperautomation or low-code area. But in reality, when we go in details, a lot of developer teams, they do usually leverage the architectural pattern, which is shown on this slide. So we have a multi-instance application, and you need to install it one by one and upgrade it one by one to each of your customers. So obviously, you get separate databases, separate application instances, and separate access management. And what's worse, customers usually require specific application configurations. So they need to implement some specific attributes. They want some dedicated reports. They want to implement custom business logic. And this definitely increases the complexity of those multi-instance applications. And in this case, all the activities regarding these applications, they cause maintenance expenses, increase of maintenance expenses, and limit your product innovations. And we often hear that all the projected budgets which were acquired somehow for product development, they are usually spent on product support because you need to maintain all these multi-instance applications. And that is one of the drivers which pushes the developer teams to go to the shared application concept. So here is the slide where you can see that it's better to pack the application in one instance and make a shared database and make somehow your customer A, B, and whatever N access this application and get their specific data, get their specific business logic, and work in the same area, in the same instance, which you can maintain the same as it was in the previous schema. So it basically shows that you get one application instance, you get a shared database, you get a unified access management, and you can implement specific application adjustments for each of your customers, as I mentioned before. In total, this schema represents an application which is isolated logically, but physically integrated. And in this case, each customer becomes a tenant. So here we can see the definition of the multi-tenancy as it is. You can see it on the slide. And I don't want to read it. I think that you can read it much better than that I am. But the thing that I want to highlight is that implementing such a pattern of getting a shared database in your single application is definitely not a rocket science. So that means that there is not so complex from the architectural aspect, but it contains some risks if you have never done this before. That means that you can get some not efficient or not correct architectural pattern, not suitable technology. And this can guide you to some failures. And the reason we are speaking about Jmix and multi-tenancy today is that Jmix has a dedicated functionality called multi-tenancy add-on, which you can see here on the screen, which guides you straightforward to implement a multi-tenancy in your application. The marketplace concept tells that you can choose the needed component from our marketplace and install it into your Jmix project. And this component will bring everything from data and business logic and configurable UI to your project to allow you implement this functionality. And by installing this multi-tenancy add-on, you simply get an application which can utilize the single database. Good to say that this multi-tenancy add-on supports two types of data. So you can basically assign some data which you want to assume like a common data, so it should be leveraged by different tenants. This is usually related to some list of values or different references, which should be shared across your tenants. And this add-on also allows you to configure tenant-specific data, which will be accessed and segregated between tenants. And tenants cannot go across borders and look at the data which is located in another database. That means that basically just installing this multi-tenancy add-on into your application, Jmix creates Jmix transforms your database to the availability to work in a segregated database mode. On top of that, each tenant can create some separate users, definitely for each tenant, and assign tenant-specific roles. Everything regarding multi-tenancy add-on you get just out of the box. And what's most useful and interesting is that it's absolutely free. Let's get some details about how does it work. First of all, I should pay attention that it's a single database. It's a shared single database. That means that the tenant's data is stored in the same schema, and basically your application shares the same tables. To implement this pattern, you should introduce a special attribute, as it's shown here in the code example, of type string, which is annotated with the tenant ID. So here you can see this special attribute, which is assigned to the customer entity in this example. And this will enable Jmix to isolate data on the query level. So that means that it will modify dynamically the queries which you implement in your application to make the existing user with a specified tenant to access on the entities which connected to this tenant attribute. And what's more, Jmix automatically maintains this tenant ID attribute when it implements saving of the entity under the current user session. So it gets the tenant ID attribute from the user session and puts it in the database. To make it work properly, you should also introduce in your application the attribute tenant in your user entity. Here you can see the example of implementing the built-in user entity. I'm paying attention to this because you can also extend your application by utilizing external identity provider like Okta. Here you can see the example again, just related to this area where you store your users in your database. Sure, it's the most simple example, but it just works. And assigning this tenant attribute in the user and configuring this tenant in the UI of your application or in a programmatic way, you can connect the user to the tenant. And if the user stored in your database has the assigned tenant, it will automatically managed by Jmix to get the entities related to this tenant, as I've mentioned on the previous slide. And for the users who have this tenant attribute empty, so there is nothing assigned, those users will work inside your project as administrators. So that means that they will access the data of all tenants. And once again, this will be performed by Jmix automatically. Thus, first of all, you need to modify the entities of your application by the tenant ID attribute, which is string. And the next thing you should do is that you should modify the user entity, also introducing this tenant attribute and assigning this tenant value programmatically or in UI to a dedicated tenant of your applications. And once again, you can use an external identity provider, which can also support the tenant attribute. And the last thing which you should not forget before launching your application to production is that you should exclude the tenant attribute for the tenant users who are not administrators. This can be done in a declarative way by the security subsystem implemented in Jmix. So this can be done by the wizard, which allows you to configure the attributes allowed for the specific role. So here on the screen, you can see the example where I specify the role operator, and for this operator, I just exclude the tenant from the customer entity. As I've mentioned before, I've added previously this attribute to this entity. Excluding this attribute from the role from the designed role, you just do not this to manipulate this data somehow in UI. So this means that you secure your UI from some manipulations with this data. Basically, this doesn't mean that this won't work. Jmix will still do everything automatically when the entity of customer under this role will be saved. Jmix will assign this attribute tenant with the user session attribute automatically. On top of that, I should mention that based on the theme that Jmix is a platform and it consists of a lot of different models, other models also support these multi-tenancy capabilities. So the models like reports, like login, they support this by default. So you do not need to do something additional. And this is very valuable when we speak about cost expenses again. Coming back to the agenda, we just opened 2 topics about implement and future-proof technology stack and some predefined capabilities to implement shared application and multi-tenancy in your application to reduce expenses or reach cost savings. And now we are switching to the scalability option. And the first point here is the cloud deployment. Here I would like to give a word to Mario, who will show an example of an application, of a demo application, which definitely represents the value of Jmix in this area. Mario?
Yeah, hi everyone. Also from my side. So yeah, the first thing that we want to discuss is, can you go next slide, please? Is this topic of, how does Jmix actually supports the different, capabilities that are needed to provide this SaaS solution that we were talking about in the beginning. So, mainly if we look at it, what are 2 core important aspects to consider when trying to build a SaaS solution? First of all, like the multi-tenancy capabilities are very important to actually implement that right, because this is the whole idea of the SaaS business, that you basically share or customers can just use it on the fly without needing to install everything. So this means you run the software, you run the software for all of your customers. So this is why multi-tenancy is obviously very important. And the other thing is cloud deployments, because this, let's say, it's a natural fit to actually build SaaS solutions on top of cloud technologies. And yeah, I mean, here it's a little bit, what the slide should show you is that Jmix will basically support both of those underpinnings of a proper SaaS solution. So this has to do something with the fact that, Jmix is built on top of Spring Boot, which is by definition, or it's very optimized for running in the cloud. It has capabilities to run on Kubernetes and Docker, and all the major cloud vendors are very well supported, and not only, in order to run your service, but also to leverage other stuff like secrets management or databases or whatever. So this is really where Spring Boot brings a lot of benefits, and this is why then Jmix also just gains all of those benefits basically. So this is the first thing, and the second thing is this multi-tenancy. So this is here again what Victor already was talking about. With this multi-tenancy add-on, we basically provide like an easy start into this whole domain. And the same goes for cloud. So Jmix has some capabilities to like bring or like make it even easier to deploy to AWS, for example. There's a capability, but this is really supporting both of those aspects. Okay, and then I think we can go to the next slide, and there we can then talk about the Jmix Bookstore example that Victor already mentioned, because we were actually thinking this might be a good example to show off, because indeed it is an example of a multi-tenant application, and it's actually also using the multi-tenancy add-on that Victor was just describing. So this is why we then can just go ahead and take a look at it in a couple of minutes. But to like go through it here, the most important thing, if you think about this bookstore example, is that we segregate all of the data. So the customer data, the order data, the product data is for each tenant is different, and each user or each tenant can then enter different data or manipulate the different data sets, and this will then be totally independent of the other tenants. And the second thing is what Victor also just mentioned before, is that there are particular standard functionalities. So for example, we have added the records add-on or the BPMN engine. They also store data, and this data is also segregated. So this means that we can actually, for different users or for different tenants, just configure different BPMN processes if we want to, because at the end of the day, this is just database content, and so the regular tenant segregation will apply there. It's the bookstore example is let's say a little bit special compared to a regular multi-tenancy application, in the sense that it is actually very dynamic. So we can now, if I share my screen, then we can take a look at this one. So just give me 1 second. Okay. So it is a little bit special in the sense that when you first log into the application, or like each user that logs into the application actually get assigned their own tenant, which is perhaps not something that you do have on your use case, but you can think of it like self-registration of tenants. So this is basically what is implemented here. And first of all, you can see at the beginning when you log into the application that you at the top see here tenant identifier, which is actually automatically generated when you first open up this page. And in this case now it's just some random number, and if I log in, then I'm able to see the data for this particular tenant. You can see also here on the top. So let's go, for example, to some kind of master data. So we could, as one example, create another region. So we could say this US Northwest, for example, and now this is actually then visible to all users that are belonging to the same tenant. So if I log out again and log in with the same tenant and use one of the other users, so for example, let's see, not 100% sure to who is actually capable of seeing that. Okay, so here actually I picked a user that is actually not capable of seeing those regions. So this is why we cannot actually see it, but be rest assured, this person would see the same data. Now, if we go and just change the tenant, and this is something like if we would say, there's just another customer on your SaaS application, and here we log into the same application. Okay, so this first time that we log in, this is why it generates actually some test data. But if you go here then to master data and region, you now see that the Northwest is actually gone. And if I go back to the D, then you see that it's there again. And this is just because of the fact, the way, how the multi-tenancy implementation works. And as you can see, also this Northwest was now automatically assigned. So if we look at the database content, we would see that it has the tenant identifier assigned to this record. Actually, if we go here to Entity Inspector, we should be able to see the database content just so that you are aware of how this works. So this is this record here, and most likely, okay, so I cannot for some reason not scroll here. So let me just try to squeeze those. You can see here the tenant identifier on the record itself, and this is how basically the segregation happens. And the stuff that we're talking about before was also not only about the data, right, but also about the BPMN processes, for example. So let's just go here, and we can have like a look at our one business process that is implemented in this example application, and we can just look at the definition. So this is how it is implemented by default, let's say as a standard for use case. If now I would say this particular customer should be able to change either they change it on their own, or we just deploy it for this particular customer to have some different process. So for example, we could say we would like not to have some kind of approval process whatsoever, right? So instead we would remove this, we will not remove those, and we directly go from the point where a person marks an order as valid, and then it immediately places an order. So I could, just save it and deploy it. And then if we now log into another tenant, so for example, the one that I just created before, and we go back to the process definitions, you can see that the old process is still there. So this is gives quite some flexibility in terms of not only about the data segregation, but also how the different instances, so to say, of your applications for the different customers are actually behaving. And this is a combination of this BPMN engine that supports the multi-tenancy application add-on, and then actually using the multi-tenancy add-on as well. And this is basically for all of the add-ons that are present in Jmix. So this is also true for the reports I just explained you before. Yeah, okay, so I think with that, we are done with the demo. There is nothing more to show. You can check out the source code if you are interested in how this technically works, or yeah, just read up the documentation on the multi-tenancy add-on in general. Okay, then I will stop share my screen, and then you can continue.
Yeah, thank you, Mario. I will come back to my presentation. Just a moment. Yeah, that's it. I hope it works. Yeah, and we'd like to add that you can easily access this Jmix Bookstore source code in the Jmix Learning Center in the Jmix Learn section. So you can just download on your own notebook, on your own workstation, and examine how all this stuff is really implemented. And we continue. So basically, we just mentioned that Jmix supports cloud deployment, and Mario explained the reason why it can be straightforward with the Jmix architectural concept. And again, I want to highlight that the support of power users, which we enable with Jmix, is a very valuable feature. And I just even want to point out that it's usually underestimated. That means that in Jmix, we implemented a very sophisticated BPM implementation, especially the example which Mario have shown you just a minute before. And we see a lot of potential for this area. So that means that basically this capability gives you gives you the functionality to design the business case sensitive business logic in your application using this. Doing this, you get the ability to deliver this tool to your users. So that means that they can configure somehow these business process models by their own, according to their own needs, being same time or storing their data same time in one application instance. We believe that such kind of approach, by isolating business sensitive or business related data with the BPM model and bringing power users the ability to reconfigure or make adjustments to their applications in different tenants, can definitely decrease the complexity and the amount of tasks which are going to your development team. So that means that you can concentrate your efforts on making your product better, bringing new features to your customers, while they can do their business specific configurations and adjustments by their own. And with Jmix Multitenancy add-on and other add-ons provided provided with Jmix, this will be automatically tenant specific. That means that all of these items shown on the slide, like filtering, generic filtering options, like customizable data grids, reports, they can be easily adjusted on different tenants according to their tenant specific needs. Once it has been done, you need just to guide your roadmap, follow your feature plan, and not spend too much time on configuring some specific needs of your customers and their end users. We see a lot of value in this area, especially in Jmix, where all components are interconnected with each other. And if you bring multi-tenancy into space, it automatically supports these, let's say, low-code capabilities for your end users. Let's summarize and make some takeaways about what Jmix especially performs in the area of cost savings and scalability. First of all, I need to highlight that it eases the creation of a multi-tenant application with a shared database, with a single shared database. Once again, it's not a rocket science, but with Jmix and multi-tenancy add-on, you shouldn't spend too much time on it, and it will give you a battle-proven architecture to support this kind of application. Another thing is that it provides a unified way to manage application security, supporting tenant-specific roles. So you need just to configure tenant-specific attributes in the entities, which should be tenant-specific. You need to add an attribute tenant to your user, and you should configure the role related to the tenants. So it just works. So you get it just by making several simple steps. And most of these primary steps, they are shown and represented in our Jmix documentation. You can find it on our website in the docs.jmix.io related to the multi-tenancy add-on. the technology, the springboot technology, which is the core of the Jmix, it especially enables cloud deployment and gives you the ability to consume the resources in a wise way and perform scaling when needed. So we all know that replacing your application to the cloud enables you to dynamically scale the consumption of resources. Yeah, and this is what Jmix do out of the box. And the last one, but I think one of the most important, we definitely put a lot of efforts in this area. Is that Jmix Jmix configuration and its interconnection between all components. It gives the ability for your applications to be customizable by your end users in their tenant-specific business area. That's definitely great. I think that this can be valuable for your business case also. Rolling back to the beginning of our application, I should mention that whenever it's a multi-instance application or a single shared database, these both scenarios, those both buttons are supported by Jmix, so you can do both. But it doesn't mean that it somehow limits the areas of multi-tenancy implementation, because as I mentioned before, single shared database is just some first step to the SaaS concept. And when you get more and more users, you usually have some resources conflicts. You gain some resources conflicts, so you need to enhance your architecture, and you can go to a more sophisticated architectural pattern. And Jmix will also support this. So that means that you can implement multiple database schemas, or you can implement multiple databases within the Jmix platform without changing the basic concept of your applications. Definitely, the last two options are much more difficult in implementation, and that's why our team is really ready to support your efforts on this road. In this area, we provide specialized development services, which include the assistance of your team while developing a SaaS architecture for your application. In this area, we can help you to perform a proof of concept together, or we can provide a dedicated training for your team. This usually allows teams who've just entered the Jmix world to perform faster onboarding. And the last option, which we also promote, is the ability to expand your team with an experienced Jmix developer who can go directly from our team. So this is almost all for today. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are ready for questions. If you have any, we can try to answer them together with Mario. Yeah, Tom, that's correct. So basically, that means that now multi-tenancy is connected with most of the add-ons natively. So you do not need to interconnect them manually. So everything is performed automatically. Yeah, and especially you can test the example we've represented today with the Jmix Bookstore. Okay, we'll wait a few minutes more. Maybe some other questions will appear. Yeah, I see a question from Sergey. That's correct. That means that it is available to specify common data and a tenant-specific data. So that means that if you define an attribute in the entity which is annotated with the tenant ID, that means that you get a tenant, this entity is a tenant specific. And if you do not specify or introduce this attribute in your entity, it will be assumed as a common entity. So this is how it basically works. Just showing you an example of configuring this tenant attribute. I demonstrate right now an application, a sample application, sample sales application on my screen, where you can see a customer, which includes this tenant attribute with this tenant ID annotation, which helps Jmix to recognize this attribute as a tenant attribute. And that means that especially this customer entity will be tenant specific, so not common. But another one, entity like order, which do not include this attribute and this annotation in its class description, so it will be common. So it will be it will suit all tenants. So it has not specific limitations. Tom is asking whether it's also integrated with the notifications plugin. Mario, could you help me with this? I'm not quite sure. I haven't tested it.
Yeah, I think I think it is. I just looked it up because it's somehow implicit because the user entity is integrated with. So yeah, exactly. So this is why then this will be recording delivered. So yeah, in this respect, it is implemented. I'm not 100% sure about the configuration, if there is anything. I'm not so aware of how the notification add-on works, but I think there's nothing like configuration that needs to be on a per tenant entity, but I might be wrong here. Yeah, but in general, this is possible to use it in the multi-tenancy context.
Because your Jmix Bookstore application does implement this pattern, so you use notifications in your Jmix Bookstore.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, it depends a little bit on how the implementation of the sending out the notification is, because it's either possible to do it programmatically or to do it via the standard mechanisms. And in case so perhaps in case you implement it in such a way that you want to distribute notifications to all users, right? So this might also be a requirement sometimes to have actually across tenant boundaries. Then this would be possible, but this is not the default. So by default,
I think that this should be configurable. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, this I think this would be.
But when we talk about notifications in the scope of the BPM model, so that means that when you tick a feature to announce the user that he received the task with the in-app notification, it will automatically work inside the tenant, because this BPM will run inside the tenant, inside the specific tenant. So yeah, that's, I think that's correct. That's definitely the question may be related. There are some difficulties can happen when we talk about broadcast notifications for all users of a specific tenant. It's configurable, but not, let's say, in this seamless way. Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mario. Tom says that he made it for this because the global notification plugin from Cuba no longer case is different. So I think that there is some specific use case. Yeah, okay. Mario, can you see the last comment on YouTube related to the bank application?
Yes, I've seen that, but I have a hard time understanding what the question is. So perhaps you can rephrase that. What is actually the question about that?
So this is the description of the result, and the question is how to implement multi-tenancy here.
Okay, so let's see. So we have many banks and many customers. One bank can see their data, and two
customers can see their own data. Bank can see transactions of their customers. Okay, so I think that this is what should be implemented by the security configuration of the Jmix with the multi-tenancy implementation. So there, in this case, the bank itself should be like an administrative user. So yeah, and like an administration user, and it will see all data independent of the tenant. And customers who use the data inside this bank application should be related to some tenants. So that means that the user accounts related to the bank should be assigned as administrative users without tenant related data inside. And the user, the customers should have this tenant specific attribute.
Yeah, I think like if it's about end user specific data, then so normally multi-tenancy is used for coarse-grained data segregation, right? So if you have like big amount of data, if for example have a use case where I as a user should only see my own data that I have created or something, this is more a scenario where the security roles and security subsystem is perhaps a little bit more flexible to support all of those use cases. And I think in the respect of this multi-tenancy here, the good thing is that they just work together. So when using the multi-tenancy, this is not the end for the data segregation, right? So within one tenant, you can apply any kind of restrictions additionally that you would like. So here, once again, if you go to the bookstore, there's an example. We have seen that we segregate by tenant, but this does not matter. So even within one tenant, we have multiple users, and for particular users, there are data constraints to see only a particular subset of this data. So for example, there's a sales representative as an example user that only is allowed to see the data that is belonging to the region where the sales representative is actually associated with. And this is independent of this is just in the boundaries of one tenant. And this means, you can just within this tenant do all kinds of configuration to further drill down what user is able to see which data.
Okay. And just in connection with this question, I just want to show a simple example which can also help to understand how it works. So coming back to this application with customers and orders, I've already shown that my customers have a tenant attribute. Yeah, that's it. Customer have a tenant attribute, and I've also specified a tenant ID attribute for the user. And let's go to the application. This is the sample sales application. And the thing I want to highlight here is that, look, here I have users, the user admin, which has no tenant this side. So that means that, this admin has full access. So that means that it is not related to any tenant. And here you can see some tenant-specific users like Alice, John, and Berta. Who have some assigned value of the tenant attribute. So that means that they are related to some tenants specified in my project. Yeah, and I should also mention that when you install multi-tenancy add-on, you get an administrative panel to assign tenants with their tenant ID and tenant name. And let's see how it works. So now I'm an admin. And when I access customers, I see all customers here. So whenever they are company B or company A, so I can see all of them because I have not some specific tenant assigned to my user. But if I decide to go for this user, Alice, company A, I will just try to log on in the same application. I can see customers only related to company A. So this is what Jmix performs automatically. And this is a very simple example, but this is how the bank, like a supervisor, and the customers operating in the same applications can have segregate data access. Customers, users of bank customers can see only their own data. As administrative users or supervisory roles, they can see all their data whenever there is some specified tenant assigned. Okay, and the question from Tom. He says that there was lack of documentation where the filter was effectively applied. I see the in documentation now only mentions native SQL is not supported. Tom, if you mean that the native SQL is not supported in multi-tenancy mode, that it is true, because we cannot catch dynamically and modify the query when it's written in native SQL. We can work only with the GPQL queries and modify them. This is what performed by Jmix automatically. If I understood the question correct, this is the answer. And as for the generic filter, so basically, Mario, can you add something how the generic filter applies multi-tenancy. I think that I know that it applies automatically if the tenant ID attribute is assigned to the entity to which the generic filter is connected. The example I've shown just several minutes ago, if you will access the filter in the tenant specific mode, it won't allow you to see the attributes which are not allowed for this role, and it won't get the entities which are not related to this tenant. So, and this is performed without any additional manipulations. It just works automatically. Jmix again interconnects all these components by itself automatically. Sergey, is it possible to create one user in different tenants, not admin, and one user in different tenants? So you are not, Sergey, you are not restricted somehow in creating users in different tenants, and even more, users in different tenants can have same names. So we can have Alice in tenant A and Alice in tenant B, and it works. It works. Mm-hmm. Mario, I'm not sure that the question from VibeHub, sorry if I'm bad in pronunciation, is related to multi-tenancy about the SQL function usage in the data manager without using key value entities. But can you comment it somehow?
I'm not aware of the answer, first of all, and I think this is also not related to multi-tenancy. So perhaps you can just go to the forum and ask this question.
Yeah, I think that
I think they will be helping you out on this one. Yeah, and regarding the question from Sergey about the if you have multiple, basically you dynamically want to switch between the tenants for a given user, right? So this is a scenario. So if I understand correctly, I think it would be possible. I would have to double check this one. If it's coming out of the box, or if the multi-tenancy add-on provides any limitation in this regard. So generally speaking, the idea of the multi-tenancy application is to provide an easy start when you have like fixed boundaries between the tenants and you really want to segregate the data. If you are in scenarios where it's more, let's say, diverse in the data access requirements, then you can always fall back to the security subsystem, right? You can basically solve everything that we have been explaining here, which is implemented in the multi-tenancy application, also just with regular security roles and role level roles from Jmix. So it's more like that. It's a more convenient way of doing that. So this means if you have like more needs for more flexibility, then probably if there is a limitation in the multi-tenancy add-on, you can just implement that as a regular security subsystem mechanism. But yeah, if you ask this question in the forum, perhaps I can answer that later, and then we can have a discussion about the concrete use case, and I can provide an example application also to see if this is actually possible.
And the last question from Tom, I see a lot of comments here in the chat. And the last one is, I'm looking at my entities in the entity designer when creating unique constraints. Should I do something to make it tenant unique? Unique within a tenant, but not unique over tenants? Or is this transparent? Transparent. Can you comment on this?
So as far as I know, this is not transparent. So if you need uniqueness, it's similar requirement to what is happening if you use soft deletion. So there you also have the requirement that you want or like oftentimes it's a requirement that you want to have uniqueness on your database, but only for the records that are not soft deleted. Because for those you might want to, you know, delete this and then create another record that has the same name or code or whatever that should be unique. And this is the same for the multi-tenancy application. So I would assume you have to create a unique index that spans across the actually business attribute and then the tenant attribute as well. So this is what I would do. And then, yeah, this is then basically how it would provide uniqueness across those, or like within one tenant, but not across tenants.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you for your comments. So I guess, yeah, I have the choice. Yeah, great. So basically, we've finished with our today's webinar. Thank you, all of you, for your questions and for your inputs today. Hope to see you soon on our next topic. It will be related to building a robust backend applications for web portals. Yeah, it will happen by the end of April. So glad to see you within the Jmix community. Have a nice day. Thank you very much. See ya. Bye bye.